Justen Brown, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing today?
Doing great. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, man. In sunny San Diego, like every day is summer here. Last week, it was mid-February. It was like 85 degrees and Rich
Great.
Pace was visiting me. And I said, as Rich is our friend, he was at the mastermind with you last week. And I said, Rich, you came here and you got a little lucky because in February, it's normally not this temperature. It's normally like 65 and sunny. So he got real lucky.
He was loving it. He was like, I'm hitting the pool. I'm hitting the beach.
Yeah, he was like a fish out of water. I'm like, yeah, and I'm dropping you off the airport. You're going back to New York, and it's like 35 degrees, snowstorm. So maybe he'll move here eventually if he virtualizes the business,
I can see it. I can see it happening.
For sure, man. Well, anyway, I've known you for a while. We actually connected on the phone probably like 2-3 years ago. And, a lot of people talk on the phone and it's hard to put a face to a name, but we're playing pickleball with our mutual friend, Tony Javier, who's been on the show a few times. And I was like, dude, I know you, we're actually meeting in person now. So it was really cool. So we've been playing pickleball. We got to know each other. So I'm looking forward to kind of interviewing you, your journey in the real estate industry. You obviously got an escrow company you own, you do flips, you do apartment deals. So I'm really looking forward to chopping it up and also learning more about your success habits. I know you're a big reader, and I actually just read The Richest Man in Babylon per you and Todd Toback's recommendation on your interview. So let's just kind of get started, man. How did you jump into the real estate game? What did you do to get started?
Yeah, great. I mean, I'll give you the quick background story. Grew up not in the wealthiest families. So kind of a dumpster diver kid growing up in elementary and middle school. And that's where we jump into dumpsters, get our clothes, our shoes, and our school clothes. And then just naturally gravitated towards sales, being a little salesperson, with the Boy Scouts, and then anything I could sell to make a buck. So going around neighborhoods, mowing lawns, raking leaves. Got into high school, and then I had some friends that were in the real estate industry, and then they recruited my brother into the industry, and he became wildly successful at a very young age. And he goes, "Hey, dude," he was paying me actually to work for him. He's like, "What do you want to do? Do you want to go to college, or do you want to come to the business?" And I was like, "Well, let's make a lot of money." So kept working for him. And then my senior year in high school, I was studying my tail off to get my real estate license. My goal was to pass my real estate exam and get my license before I graduated high school. And I say that because it's a key point of goal planning and goal setting. So I set that goal, accomplished that goal, and then just went right into business at a young age. Was a traditional retail real estate agent and helping people buy and sell and all that other good stuff. And the market in 2007, 2008 adjusted on us just like everybody. Yes. And sure. I had to learn really quickly how to make money. See, it's easy going from high school of making no money to an industry where you can make no money. Months at a time. And so I learned how to buy and sell within a week. And I did that. I started all over the country because I had a lot of really good connections. And I realized I was spreading myself really thin. So I just really focused on California. Did a lot of buy and sells really quickly. What we would call now would be almost like a wholesale, maybe a wholesale, but I was doing it very quickly. So I would cash fund close on a Monday and cash fund close on a Friday with my end buyer.
Yeah. You weren't double closing. You were just buying and then immediately reselling.
Yep. Immediately reselling. But the caveat was I was running my transaction, and then at the same time I was running the end transaction. Yeah. So they were running the race at the same time. I would just close my transaction before they closed theirs.
I love it.
And then then I learned how to buy, fix, and sell. I spent tons of money on mentors, classes, conferences, partnerships, but I will tell you, it was one of the greatest investments. And I mean, I still pinch myself today to see where I've come from and what I've been able to accomplish. And I still keep in touch with some of these mentors. they say you invest 10,000 hours to learn something. I've spent more than 10,000 hours on YouTube. And actually probably just when podcasts like this started coming available, man, I devour podcasts. I would try to do 5 to 10 a day. Whenever I could, if I wasn't talking to somebody on the phone or doing emails, or even if I was doing emails, I'd have a podcast playing in the background. So from there, recruited into escrow, learned the escrow industry. Once I realized the escrow part, I realized how bad of an agent and investor I was. And then once I learned the escrow, I was like, oh man, I need to share the news, share the goodness with these agents to help them become better, and to treat people a lot kinder, because we are a service industry. And from that, like learning escrow and what I know now in escrow, I mean, helps investors, not just in California, because we only do California, but I get phone calls from investors in different states. I get, like, I'll look at a phone number and it's 480, it's a 208, it's a, 818, it's a, 456, all over the country. And, most times is it spam, but then it's funny. I'll like, hey, I'm in a meeting, text me or something like that. It says, hey, my name is so-and-so. You were referred to me by so-and-so. And I'm like, awesome. And I'll give you a call back, and I love to help any way I possibly can.
I love that, dude. And I'm really excited to like unpack all the kind of how you started this conversation, because there's a lot we can cover today on the show. So I actually want to start with escrow. So for people who aren't familiar with you, I'll just share. You own Alliance Escrow. You guys are in San Diego, and you guys cover the entire state of California, right? Yep. You guys can do deals up in like the Bay Area and even in LA.
All the way up to Humboldt County. I just had a conference call this week with an investor up there. He's like, hey man, I got 5 contracts. Like, can you help me? I'm like, yeah, totally. As long as it's in California, I got you covered. That's
amazing. So let's unpack the escrow process for people who are a little bit new. And then for the maybe listeners who are not in California, because I do business there, you do business there. It's a little bit different than your typical title company state or attorney state. New York's totally different, but that's different. We have another podcast just for that, right? We have a New York real estate podcast just for New York real estate. So in California, can you just share how the process is, at least in Southern Cal, because Southern Cal is a little different than like the Central Valley?
Yes. Yeah. So escrow, for all intents and purposes, we are a neutral third party. We are the glue to a transaction between buyers and sellers, investors and sellers, or real estate agents, whether it's a listing agent or a selling agent. We are the party that's responsible for processing and maintaining and controlling all of the funds. So we are a neutral third party, meaning we are beholden to everybody and to nobody. So we go off of the dictation of the purchase contract. And sometimes people don't have purchase contracts. They will literally, it is true, like on a napkin, hey, my name is Bob Smith, seller is Cindy Lou. And, and we just basically take that and drop that into the escrow instructions, which are effectively used as a California purchase agreement. But yeah, escrow we are the neutral third party, and we just process and we coordinate with everybody in the transaction. Our job is to ensure that if you, the seller, and the buyer say, hey, we want a 15-day transaction, we want a 5-day transaction, we want a 500-day transaction, we make sure that we stay on track and we accomplish everything when we're working with title, inspectors, termite, invoices, TCs, lenders. So on average, in California, there is 30 to 35 parties to one transaction. Now that is retail. So that would be your traditional buyer and traditional seller. Wholesalers, a little bit different. Flippers, a little bit different. But in general, we are the party that communicates with everybody.
Yeah.
And we keep everybody's money safe. That's the most important thing.
That's big. And that's what I like about California, because in other areas like of the country, this, like the title company is doing literally everything. Like they have the funds, they do the title, and it can be a little bit of a cluster. Like I've done a bunch of business in Dallas, and it's just like this big cluster, a lot of like shadiness going on, just because there's a lot of like.
It appears it doesn't give you the warm and fuzzy feeling that you got like, hey, I'm communicating with this party that's equally communicating and passing information along to the other party. And you're like, well, are you really looking out for me or protecting my interests?
Yeah.
With escrow, there's no question. Like we keep everybody separate. You know, when we communicate with the seller, we're only communicating with the seller and the seller's approved parties. When we're communicating with the buyer, it's the buyer and their approved parties. So, and that's really important because that's what creates the neutrality. Nobody crosses lines there, and it just keeps the transaction a lot cleaner.
Oh, totally. Because I mean, you guys have seen thousands of transactions. It can get hairy, especially with off-market properties, with title issues and motivated sellers, whatever you want to call them. I mean, a lot of people in San Diego aren't motivated; they're reasonable. Little spoiler alert for people trying to do deals in San Diego.
Yeah,
there's no desperate people for the most part. They're usually reasonable and they're smart and they're willing to sell at a discount and they're cool with it and they know what's going on. So, you know, it keeps the escrow process a lot smoother that I've found, at least dealing with reasonable people, because I have found that, at least in California, from my experience with the process, because escrow holds the glue, like you said, the buyer can choose their own title company. Usually I use like Fidelity or something like that. And the escrow does that. They pull the title from the title company and then they, you know, usually get it back relatively quickly. And they're just able to like conduct these transactions to where it's very professional and it's not as complicated as a lot of new people think it might be. They're like, oh, I got to go to an escrow company. And I'm like, no, you got to submit a contract, put a deposit down, and wait for them to tell you what to do next. And that's the big thing with escrow. It's like you said something earlier, like you being in the escrow industry now, like it's a lot of work for the escrow company. So the investor needs to have the right expectations going into a transaction, so they don't make something very simple more complicated than it needs to be. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And the one of the really, really important things about escrow is when we have a fiduciary duty to each party, my job and my team's job is to protect the seller and the buyer. And let's go down that title path. So we'll get the PR, the preliminary title report, and we actually scrub that thing. We look at it and we want to make sure, okay, is there any easements? Is there any tax liens? Is there any child support? Is there alimony? Is there any old liens from Uncle Leo that tacked it on? Is there a mechanics lien? And what we would call those would be a cloud on title. I'm not going to get too much into it because I'm not in the title industry, but our job is to make sure, hey, Mr. Buyer, we want to bring these things to your attention. Item 6, 7, and 8, those are standard. 9 and 10, we need to get some information on.
Yeah.
And we'll uncover that and we're like, hey, Mr. Seller, did you know you have a $150,000 tax lien? And as an investor or even as a buyer, you're like, whoa, I'm buying this for X price, $150,000. And the seller's like, I didn't know about that. It's like, well, if you didn't, great. We're notifying you now and let's address it. But if they did know about it, oh yeah, you know what? I am aware of that. And then we'll say, okay, well, what do you want to do? How do you want us to navigate this process? And a lot of times they're like, hey, you know what? I'm aware of it. I know I owe it. What are my options? And as escrow, we can't really tell you what to do, but we could say, hey, what we have seen is with your permission, let's try to, 1, get a demand for it. 2, let's see if we can negotiate it with you. As long as we have their authorization and they're complying with us. I mean, man, we want a transaction to close more than a seller or a buyer or an investor because we don't get paid unless everybody does a transaction.
And it's funded. Yeah. So your interests are like, you're all rowing the boat in the same direction, which is amazing. And that's what I love about the escrow process.
So yeah, it's been great. And I mean, our thing is like, we just want to make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on. And then at the same time, people get busy, investors get busy, buyers and sellers get busy. They're running their lives. It's our job to say, hey, Greg, I just want to let you know our closing is in 4 days. Oh crap. Okay. What do I need? And we just keep everybody on track.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the thing I've noticed too, is like, when you're good at communicating and you communicate well and the client communicates well with you, it makes the process a lot easier than people think. And when you mentioned something with title issues, like the way I look at the investing business, and we'll cover that after we finish the escrow part, is like at the end of the day, investors get paid to solve problems. And 8 out of 10 projects that I buy or wholesale deals that I do have some sort of an escrow hair on them or something. And a lot of the sellers, this is their first and last time they're selling a property, especially in California, because they're getting a lot of money. And I look at it like, let's take this one step at a time. Every title issue, we will find a way to solve it if it's solvable, and we'll find a path to the closing. And I've done enough transactions, and you've done enough transactions where like I pretty much know for the most part somewhat how to handle it. And if I don't, I know someone who probably has, and I can ensure that certainty to the client so they know, and then the escrow company knows that it's going to go down and it's going to happen. So like a big thing I see actually, and you definitely have seen this probably thousands of times. Let's say someone's deceased on title. It's in a trust, like a lot of trusts in California. Yep. Most of the deals are in trusts. When someone is deceased and the house is owned in a trust, as long as the trustee is alive, it's pretty much smooth sailing. Yep. For the most part, because they have the authority to sign. This is where I see people get thrown off in California mostly. Let's say the owner on record is 105 years old and they're dead, and then there's no like will. That you have to probate that, from my understanding in California. You can't do heirship affidavits like in other states where it's like takes 2 weeks. So you got to open up a probate case.
Yeah, and we work with a lot of attorneys here in San Diego that specialize in probate, and we make a lot of referrals to them. And because we'll get people to say, hey, you know what, my aunt passed away, and we don't have, it's called intestate, without a will,
yes,
or a trust. I highly recommend anybody that owns a piece of property always have a trust.
Oh yeah.
But I understand there's a cost associated with that, but that's for another time. But if they don't have a trust or a will, and say we have a savvy investor like you, that's like, hey, Justin, I got this one. It looks like it's going to be a wonderful deal, but I think I have to go through probate. Who do you got? And I'll refer you over to an attorney. It's like, all right, hey, let's work through this.
Yeah,
it is a little bit of a process, but we'll get it done.
Yeah. And it's like the seller, as long as a seller knows that you're going to solve their problem, and like I'll pay for the probate usually, and like it'll get like credited or whatever. But like being able to be a problem solver when you're in escrow is like the number one thing. Because I see a lot of new people, or even people who are not used to these hairy deals, who maybe have like MLS deals they're buying. Mm-hmm. They have one objection come up in the escrow process, and they like freak out and they run around with their hair on fire. And I'm like, listen, this is normal. Like you got to understand this is normal. And there's always a way to solve the problem if the seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy, every time. Right. And that's why we get paid. Sometimes the money we get paid is because we're able to solve these problems that the seller didn't want to sell on their own. Right. And when you work with the right company, you're able to have a solid process to get to the closing table. Like you mentioned, everyone wants to get to the closing table because that's when the funds get dispersed and everyone gets paid. You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah, for sure, man. So one more question on escrow, and then we'll shift over to the fix and flip side. When it comes to escrow, how does an escrow company earn money? Like, because I know there's like points for lenders and all doc recording fees, but like, how does, generally speaking, a California escrow company earn their income or their revenue, for their services provided?
Yeah. 100%. So for us, we have what's called escrow fees, and that will be a calculation based on the sales price. So if we're selling, if you're buying a $200,000 property, our escrow fee will be calculated based on that. And then it's split between the buyer and the seller. So usually it'll be half each their own, 50-50. Sometimes a lot of my investors actually, to make it a sweetheart deal. And I think this is a really good tip for most investors out there. Hey, you know what, Mr. Seller, I'll cover all the fees. Because what do you want to show? I want to show that the seller is going to net more money by working with me. And for me to cover, a couple $1,000, if I'm going to be making a great profit, then that's fine. And so we'll have an escrow fee. And then just like title will have a calculated rate. So it'd be very similar. If you're in an attorney state, you would pay an attorney their fee, for their closing fee and their trust accounting and all that other good stuff.
Oh yeah.
Their fees are a little bit more.
They're high. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very high.
And you wonder because they don't nearly do as much work as we do in California.
Not even close.
I'm not discrediting them by any means. They do a work and they do hold a lot of value with their knowledge, but their fees are they're attorneys.
They are attorneys. They bill you they get paid at closing when it's a closing attorney. But yeah, it's kind of funny sometimes. Like I'll buy a house in New York and like I have to pay for the seller's attorney because that's how I got the house.
Yep.
And like we just had this happen yesterday, like on a wholesale deal. Like the guy's bill was $12.50. And I said, I'll pay it. But I said, listen, seller, your attorney didn't do SHIT, didn't do shiitake here. And I'll pay the fee because we're here right now. But just going forward, consider yourself a little lucky because my attorney did all the work, but it is what it is. I'm not going to squander,
right,
$1,500 or whatever to lose that on 25. So there's definitely a lot of value in what the escrow company does. And then one more, just to close the loop, I had one more, just this is relevant to our show. I am seeing now, at least in other states, we have a lot of mutual friends who do business all over the country, wholesaling, or let's just say a sign-in, because wholesaling, you can double escrow and all that stuff, double close. Assignments are getting a little tricky. And I had ran into this in Pennsylvania a couple of weeks ago. I have to buy it and then resell it. Are you seeing assignments, at least in Southern Cal, get a little bit more complicated with the disclosures? Like in San Diego, you can make $300,000 on an assignment fee if you get a crazy deal, or you can normally make about $50,000 to $70,000 on an assignment normally in San Diego. What do you see like when it comes to like the disclosures and things like that? Like, how do you kind of navigate that? So like, the deal can still go down, but like people don't get pissed off because like, what do you see? Because I mean, this is very common in San Diego.
That's a really good point. So what you had mentioned, double escrow, double closings.
Yes.
In California, double escrow, double closings are considered illegal. So what we do is we have like a concurrent escrow. So meaning, like I had mentioned when I first started learning about flipping and all that, you're running two escrows at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're running them concurrently with each other. Within there, we have a set of disclosures that our company actually created and we had vetted by our legal team to make sure that it's appropriate and it's totally above board and everybody is understanding. When I say everybody, meaning the sellers, the buyers, if there's agents involved, everybody understands what's going on. So in California, we do concurrent closings. In other states, you can do double escrows. And it's getting, like you said, it's getting harder and harder. So with that, I think it was the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, and then also HUD came out in California. Our purchase agreement was just upgraded. And originally a purchase agreement in California, if you go way back, was 2 pages, went to 6 pages, went to 9 pages. Now it's 15 pages, 17 pages. Now we have 21 pages, I believe.
It's crazy.
Gotta love California. But that's job security for me.
Yeah.
So in our updated, effectively January 1 of this year, 2022, there is an assignment section in there. Really?
Interesting.
Yes. I'll have to send you a copy of it just so you can I have a great RPA that's highlighted. It's got notes. It explains things. It's key things that have changed from the old contract to the new contract. And it's very robust. But in there is an assignment section. You do disclose it, but the key is, especially for escrow, is we want to make sure we create and keep the anonymity and the neutrality. So that way we're protecting the seller and we're protecting the buyer. Generally, when you're assigning, wholesaling, wholetailing, fix and flipping, but usually with the assignment aspect, because it happens so quickly, we want to make sure that we keep everybody anonymous, but also pertinent to their transaction. And what I mean by that is if you have a to B transaction, and then we're going to have a B to C transaction, the C should never know about the A, and the A should never know about the C. Meaning you, the investor, the B, is really kind of juggling both sides. And then when you have a really good escrow team on your side, They understand that, we're aware of that, and we want to make sure that we keep everything above board, but we also get to the finish line with everybody.
Absolutely. So
and not all escrow companies do that.
Oh,
so
100%. Yeah.
Just, whether you're working in California or somewhere else, which now we're going to transition, but it's like, make sure that your closing team understands what you're trying to accomplish.
Totally, bro. That is $1 million advice right there, dude. Seriously.
Yeah. And I can't tell you, like, I get investors. In fact, I had one that literally just blew up on them. And I feel frustrated and I feel saddened for that investor, because they stood to make a healthy wholesale assignment fee.
In California, or is it out of state?
It was California.
Yeah.
And the closing company completely ruined it, bastardized that transaction. And it didn't need to happen that way. And really what happens is if they don't understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish and and how your business works, they will ruin it every single time. And I hate to say that, because there's a lot of great companies out there and there's a lot of great people in our industry.
Yeah, that's so true, man. And I've found too is normally the sellers they know that you're making a profit. And like, I think in California that you have to sign, from what I remember, they have to acknowledge that it's being assigned, but they don't see the assignment fee because it's not really relevant to them. But the buyer always sees it because they're buying the assignment from you. But yeah, I mean, it's really, people get a little scared, but it's like, you know what? If the seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy and you're working with the right escrow company, it will work out. Like, bottom line. Key there is if you're working with the right escrow company, right? So if you're in San Diego, hit up Alliance Escrow. You know what I mean? So I think we had a good little jam there on the escrow process. People definitely got some takeaways from it. So I want to shift over now to the fix and flip aspect, because you're doing fix and flips in San Diego. San Diego is probably one of the most competitive markets, if not the most competitive market in the nation, mainly because of the purchase price and the sellers. Yes, there are a lot of people chasing deals out here. I found that the competition factor is less of an issue over the sellers, and they know they have gold on their hands, basically. So what have you done to stay relevant in the fix and flip side? Because I know you do a lot of fix and flip projects all over the county. So what are you kind of doing to make sure you and your team are successful navigating the waters here in San Diego?
Yeah, great question. One thing that, I've been doing it since 2007. So I did my first couple of flips. And one thing that I've really held true to is making sure that I have high integrity and high character with anybody and everybody I'm working with. If I found and I felt like something was going to go sideways, I would much rather just back out of the deal just to maintain a good name.
Yes.
So one thing that we've done really well with is just making sure that we're educating the community, educating sellers, educating agents, and also just giving them tools like, hey, this is how you do a transaction. This is what you can expect to me when working with me. And I think when you have the clear expectations and you have great communication, you're going to have a winning team. You're going to have a success formula. One of the things that I also do is just like everybody else, and I preach it all the time. What are you doing to get deals? Because if you're not doing anything, do you just magically think you're going to have a deal in your hands in the next 30 or 60 days or 90 days or even this year? No. So I encourage investors, make sure you have a plan. First and foremost, sit down with your mentor, sit down with somebody that is doing it and say, hey, what can I do? So I usually will sit down with them and say, hey, well, what's your goal? I want to do 100 flips this year. Okay, cool. Love that. How many flips have you done so far year to date? None. Okay. Is 100 realistic? And they're like, no. I'm like, I love the fact that you want to do that many and I want to support you, but let's just get the first one. Let's go after that first one, write number one down, and then we're going to build out the plan. Okay, what are we going to do to make sure that we are getting that first one? Well, one thing would be, are we knocking on doors? Are we driving for dollars? Are we walking the dog in the neighborhood? How many people are we speaking to every single day, letting them know I'm a real estate investor or I'm looking to buy a home in this neighborhood? It's not that difficult, but we have to major in the minor and minor in the majors. And if we have that plan, and if we're doing door drops, I like to call them foot soldiers. because they're out there dropping off flyers or yellow letters. And then on top of that, once you kind of have that base foundation of all the activities, or we're going to prospect off of prop stream. I hear that a lot on podcasts, whether it's going to be NODs, which is a notice of default, NOTs, notice of trustee sale, probates, divorces, deaths. Like these are all things that a new investor can set a profile and filter for, and then they just got to take action. Hey, you know what? I'm going to make 5 phone calls today, and I'm going to talk about this, or I'm going to go pass out 10 flyers, or I'm going to go to my local RIA and I'm going to talk to people. Hey, I'm a new investor and I'm looking to buy my first flip. I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody saying, hey, I'm looking to buy my first flip. I actually think there's great power in that because people want to see people succeed. I love helping somebody that is brand new, and I want them to go out there and crush it. I want them to get their first deal. I want to set them up right. And I believe everybody does, whether we're listening to this podcast or other podcasts or YouTube channels, they want them to succeed. The next step would be, how many offers are you writing?
Huge. I love that, bro. That's the spine of the business, bro.
Yeah, because we're not going to get that first one if all we're doing is this. So we have to do this with this. We're going to write an offer today. Hey, Greg, I know that you want $4 million for your $150,000 house. Great. Help me understand why you think it's worth that. And then you just kind of go through that conversation with them, and you bring them back down to reality. Well, hey, I noticed, I looked at your neighbor's house that is cherried out. It's beautiful. And it just sold for $175,000. Did you see that? Yeah. I saw the house. I actually went into the open house. I mean, it's gorgeous. Okay. Is your house equivalent to that?
Does it match up?
Cool. And then you just say, hey, Greg, you know what? How about let me write you an offer. Let me make an offer. And you and Mrs. consider it, think about it. But I think we can make it really, really smooth. But just get in the habit of writing that offer. Just like we go to the gym, we flex those muscles. We got to get some big muscles. We have to flex that muscle of writing offers. So
I love that, dude.
Write 1 offer a week. Even if you have no chance in getting that deal, just write the offer.
I love it, dude. It's so true. And like, I say this to my team, I'm like a broken record. I look at the scorecard every day. How many offers got out? What do we do? And they turn green. Like we have like a little system where it's like, if it gets accepted, it turns green.
Love it.
And I say, the more we put out and the more good conversations we have, the more deals we're going to get. Ultimately, the more success we're all going to have, the more problems we're going to solve. So man, phenomenal advice, especially San Diego. I've noticed, like I said this earlier, like people think that you're going to run into like some desperate seller, right? And listen, maybe once in a while that happens, but I've found from the people I've worked with in San Diego, the sellers are usually normally a little bit older. They know the house is worth X. Let's just say it's like a fixer in like Spring Valley. They know it's worth $650, right? They're cool with taking $425 because they know they don't have to deal with it. And like, they might not be motivated, but they're reasonable. And that can be a great deal for you and a great deal for the seller. So depending on where you are, like if you're in Southern Cal or you're in a crazy market like New York, where I operate, like you got to understand that if their price is reasonable and it's worth way more than what they're saying, they don't need to be motivated in order to buy their house. Like I remember we did a deal in Spring Valley, actually, ironically. The guy was like, I want $300 for it. This was a couple of years ago. And I was like, okay, let's go lock it up, and went and locked it up and wholesaled it. But I'm like, this guy wasn't desperate. He was definitely a millionaire. Like the guy had properties all over the place. He lived on Catalina Island. But like the new investor would be like, oh, well, they're not motivated. I'm like, yeah, but just because they're not motivated, you got to make the offer. Yep. And if the price is reasonable, like who cares? I'd rather have them not be motivated, because then they're not emotionally wound up in the transaction. They're just like, cool,
Yeah.
But it's all about putting those offers out.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and you're right. Like, people sell things for many different reasons. And they do. Motivation is key, but desperation is generally not even in the sphere of when it comes to real estate, buying or selling or flipping or anything like that. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm moving back home and to the Midwest. I'm getting out of California. which is actually, happening a lot right now.
A lot of people, man. I see this all the time, every day.
Arizona, Texas, Nevada, Idaho, Kentucky, Tennessee, never New York. Sorry.
Yeah, that's usually New York going to Florida.
Yeah, and that's really what we're going to see people in California is, hey, I want to sell because I'm moving out. I want to cash in on my gains, and you'd be surprised. People, it's not that they're leaving money on the table; it's that they're accepting the fact that I just want to get this offer and I want to close the deal so I can move on with my life. And as an investor, our jobs are to help them move on with their life, get them to where they want to go.
Totally, dude. Totally. I remember there was a guy in Oceanside and he was like, I'm 92 years old. I was in real estate for 20 years. I want 500 for this thing. And it was worth like 750. And I'm like, and I was like competing with this other guy, but like I ended up getting it because I paid a little bit more. But like this guy was like super cool. His name was Rocky, nice guy, no desperation, but like he was just moving out and he wanted to move on. He knew that he was selling below market, but he didn't care. And he was very aware of what I was doing. Right. And I assigned it, but like, it wasn't like your typical desperate seller that the guru talks about at the seminar. It was like, just like a cool guy who knew exactly what was going on. So just make sure, number one takeaway for the listeners, you got to get those offers out. Like you're never going to buy. I heard this guy say one time, this guy does like 400 houses a year in Pennsylvania. He said, I never bought a house I didn't make an offer on. And I remember that stuck with me. And I said, you know what? That's so true. It's so true. Think about it. Both of us, we've never bought a house we never offered on.
Never bought a house I never wrote an offer on. That's great.
So anyway, that was some pretty practical advice. So I wanted to just wrap the show up with you know, obviously you're doing a lot of stuff in the escrow industry and the flip business, but you're building your wealth now in the multifamily syndication business. So I want to just have you share a little bit about your journey so far. I know you bought a building in Idaho. Yep. So like how have you kind of jumped into that business, which is a lot different than just the regular residential buy, sell, or escrow business. So like how'd you get into it, and kind of catch me up to speed on what you've been doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, we can make a wonderful living flipping properties or wholesaling or anything like that. And we can make great, I like team analogies. So we can make a good bunt, first base, double, triple, home run, maybe a grand slam.
And depending on where it is.
Yeah, exactly. And, we'll make great money, but I had a mentor of mine that was extremely wealthy, very, very wealthy. And the guy always wore New Balance shoes, jeans, and a cowboy shirt, and walked everywhere with a Diet Coke. And he just said, hey, Justin, came up to me one day. He goes, hey, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing all these flips and wholesaling? And like, how come you're not keeping any of the properties? I'm like, well, money's good. And make $20,000, $30,000. That's pretty good.
It's a lot of money. Yeah.
But he challenged me. He goes, you know what? It's time for you to start building a real estate portfolio. And at first, I will tell you, when you make $100 a month versus a $30,000 flip, it's not sexy.
No.
Not sexy at all.
Not at all.
Even with the depreciation, the tax benefits, all that other good stuff, it's still not sexy. However, he just said, I promise you, after a couple of years and you continue on, you will start to understand and see where the real wealth comes from. And it's true. So I started that journey several years ago, and I would still flip properties, and I'd take that profit and then I'd roll it over into a rental. And the rentals will eventually, you put bigger down payments down equals greater cash flow. And just like, the debt snowball or the 10X rule, where you could buy, compound interest eventually happens. Compound rents is a reality. It's And so, it goes from $100 to 125 to 200 to 300 to 500 to, eventually to whatever I'm at now, and wherever I want to go. But learning how to buy and keep a property, and over a period of time, and setting a goal like, hey, you know what? I'm going to buy one house this year to keep. I'm going to buy 2 houses next year. I'm going to buy maybe a duplex or a fourplex. And then you just keep on compounding that. into something much greater. So from there, one of my greatest stories is I bought a real small house a long time ago in the East Hills of Phoenix, Arizona. Paid cash for it. Yeah, I mean, I saw it and I was like, what am I doing? What am I getting here? And I held it for about 2.5 years. The market had started to climb up, not anywhere near it is right now.
Oh, Phoenix is crazy, bro.
But
nuts over there.
And so I had a healthy return. I had a great gain. And so it's like, all right, well, if we follow Grant Cardone, the 10X rule, if we look at Kiyosaki, if we look at any of the major tycoons or, real estate moguls, Ken McElroy, if we look at any of these great guys, they're like, hey, you know what? We need to exchange into the next up leg. And so I did a 1031 exchange on that property. So I bought it for $100,000, sold it for $290,000, parlayed that into $1 million property, held that one for a little while.
San Diego or Phoenix?
That one, I actually took the Phoenix property to Idaho.
Okay, so you went north.
I went north. I bought a $1 million property up there with a 1031 exchange. And then I just completed another exchange out of that one into a $5 million property just a couple of weeks ago.
In Idaho?
No, that one's over in Georgia.
Oh, so you're just ping-ponging all over the time zones.
I do not discriminate at all. So,
I love it.
And people always ask me, hey, Justin, how do you do it? Like, how do you go to all these different areas and these different markets and these different MSAs? Well, one, it takes a lot of faith and belief. It takes a lot of trust. Do I get my butt kicked? Sure. But you know what? That's understanding that is part of the game, but also having a really good team and having great communication with everybody, having your expectation calls and checking up on people. So it's been a great ride, and I think I'm just getting started even more. So
that is awesome. And the 1031, I don't think I've had a lot of people on the show talk about that. That's basically, for the listeners, it's like when you get the proceeds of the sale, you get the gain of the sale, but instead of cashing out, you take those proceeds through a third party and you just take that and you put it into the next property and you defer your taxes. Correct? Yep. That's basically
you'll hear it on shows or you read it in books. It's called kicking the can down the road. Kicking the
can down the road. Yeah.
And in one of the old books that I read a long time ago, you exchange, and they call it swap till you drop.
Yes, till you kick it over. Yeah.
Yeah, until I croak one day, eventually all those gains will be tax-free to my heirs or beneficiaries, which would be my wife or my kids or a foundation or something like that.
So what do they call that? A stepped up basis, right?
Yeah.
So you basically never have to pay taxes because you're just deferring them, and you have to trade up into equal or greater, though. You can't downgrade. I think you have to basically keep leveling up, which is awesome because it's going to force you to grow anyway. So it's like a healthy addiction almost, it's like, yeah.
And there's a lot of, I mean, it's a positive, a good drug, so to speak.
Yeah.
Into those things, like, you just keep buying the next thing bigger and bigger and bigger, and making sure that you're doing it wisely. You're not just completely over leveraging and, you got $10 into a deal that you owe $20 million on. It'll actually, succinctly go up with each transaction. But I think everybody should read up on it.
Totally.
Get a great accommodator. They're called 1031 exchange accommodator. And there's a lot of information about there. And if you have a rental property, you start with one house, and then you can go to a duplex, and then you can go to a fourplex, and then you can go to 8 unit and 12 unit and 20 unit. And or, a lot of times what we see in escrow, this will kind of tie it all really back in, is we get a lot of seniors, elder people that will like, hey, you know what? I'm selling this property and I don't want the gains. But what they really want is they want that income. So we'll be able to do an exchange over into a TIC or a DST. A TIC is a tenants in common structure, or a DST is a Delaware statutory trust. And there's about 5 major players in the country that do it very, very well and very conservatively. And when you're conservative, you're going to have a great return, and you're going to have protection. And the seniors, they really, really like them. They have great return. They have great retirement. And also eventually will pass over to their heirs.
And they get the reoccurring, they like the reoccurring income because they don't really want to work because they're like 75 years old. They don't want to have to worry about money. So they have that reoccurring, it's almost like an annuity. What is an annuity?
100%.
And they have that certainty, right? And that's what they value. And it's just the real estate business in general, man. I mean, it's just such a great business. There's so much opportunity out there. There's so much room for growth, and it's just amazing, man. Your journey, I'm impressed. I mean, this is like the first time we've had like a in-depth call on this, bro. I mean, I could talk about this for 5 hours. So you have a lot of success in the real estate business. You're learning every day. As we wrap the show up, what are some success habits that you do on the daily to ensure you're moving the needle forward? I know you're a big reader. I can see the bookshelf behind you if people are watching this on YouTube.
I got books. I got books everywhere. One of the things that I do is I carry books with me. People think I'm a little bit odd, but I will tell you, it's the one thing that has really helped me to stay on top of my reading and my education. So I will carry a book with me for sometimes a month, a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. If it's taking me a while to read, and I'll read a page here and there, a paragraph here or there. So that's one thing, is being an avid reader. I am a huge fan of podcasts like this. I'll be at the gym, I'll be running, up the mountain, and I'll have a podcast going. And if I'm with friends, guess what? They get to listen to a podcast too, because
I love it. The same thing.
It's just what you focus on expands. And if I'm constantly looking at where I want to go, and which I touched on earlier, is I'm a huge goal setter. I believe in goals, super important. And if I'm looking at my goals and I carry my goals with me, I read them every day, if not every week. It's one of the habits that I find is super effective, is because if we're looking and reviewing our goals, we're going to constantly be moving. Our subconscious is a very powerful tool. It'll keep moving us in that direction to accomplishing those goals. Another thing that I do is I actually, in my home office, I have a mirrored closet door, and I'll take a dry erase pen. This is a great tip for anybody, usually red or purple, and I will write out my goals on there as well. But then I'll also write out quotes, affirmations, like statements, and I'll read them, and I'll read them out loud. I'll see them. And so it's auditory, it's kinetic, and then it's subconscious. So those are a lot of the things that I do. And then I believe on giving back, give back to those that are either starting out, give back to charities. If you have a gracious heart and giving heart, like, you will be blessed. I always say, bless and be blessed.
I love it. It's so true, man. When you give, you receive.
Yep.
You give, you receive. You mind if I share a quick story on that, just to drive this point home? Because I've been a big fan of that forever. And it's all about giving without any expectation, because it'll always come back to either way. So here's a quick story, because you mentioned that. I'm like, dude, I got the perfect story, just so the listeners can really grasp that point. So this was actually not that long ago. I walked the house and the septic was overflowing, and the sellers were super broke. Like, they had like $500 in their bank. And I felt horrible for them, man. I really did. And I didn't end up buying the house because they owed too much, and it was a disaster. But I told the seller, I said, listen, I'm not doing this out of reciprocity. I said, I know you're in a tough spot. I know you inherited this house and you can't sell it to me, and I don't want you to feel stuck. So I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to just pay for the septic pump, because I don't want you to be living in squalor. So I went ahead and paid for it. Was like $400. It wasn't even that bad. I actually have money. I set aside my give jar, and I use that money to just give it. And I just did it this morning on like allocating some money from a deal. So I'm a big believer in that. So anyway, I do this. Seller's really happy. I felt really good just to help them. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, win-win. So dude, I bought this other deal, and I was about to get into a lawsuit with a tenant. Like, it was this huge disaster, squatter scenario, crazy New York lawyers. It was like really bad. And I own this property. I can't go inside. We're about to get in a suit with the tenants. It's just getting really spicy. And I get a call from a lawyer like the next day. And he says, "Are you Greg Hellbeck?" And I'm like, "Oh no, usually you serve me by mail anyway. Like, I know the drill." And he's like, "I'm just calling out of the blue because I have a client who wants to buy 164 Richard." And I said, "What are you talking about? Like, is this a scam? Who are you?" I'm like, "Who?" Because I'm like a guy from New York. I'm really skeptical. I'm like, "What are you talking about, bro? Who? Let me look you up. Like, what's going on?" He says, hey, I have a client in Ohio. They have not been able to find anything in this complex. They're dying to make you an offer on your property. And I said, dude, like there's a squatter inside. Like, what do you mean? Like, this is a scam. And he's like, no, I'm serious. This is kind of random. I end up selling this thing at like this premium to this buyer, sight unseen. The lawsuit goes away, or the pending lawsuit goes away. It ends up being a home run house. And I remember calling. I actually did the deal with Rich Pace, who you met. And I called him because we had the same lead. I'm like, let's just buy it together. We pulled the Dean Rogers and did the friends with benefits.
Love it.
I call Rich and I say, hey, Rich, I don't know like how the world works, but I did like pay for this lady's septic pump out yesterday, just like to help her out. And dude, we got a like 180 cash offer on Richard Court. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, dude, they're like putting the money in escrow right now. And like, they want to close in 30. And we ended up selling it and making this huge profit. And I was like, you know what, when you get, and the big takeaway wasn't the money, that's fine. It was you give without expectation and it will always come back to you. And even if it doesn't come back to you right away, it's the right thing to do, you know? And in this business, giving is the most important thing because it's what matters, man. That's why we live to give, you know?
100%.
So I figured you get a kick out of that story, man. It was so crazy. I was like, could not believe it, dude. It was like such a random bounce. And anyway, point is to just be a giver. And Justin's clearly a giver.
That's incredible.
So yeah, dude. Well, listen, I want to wrap the show up. I want to respect your time. I know you're a busy guy. If people want to connect with you, maybe invest in some of your deals. I know you're doing some syndications now. Like, how do they get plugged into your world to work with you? And then also, how do they find out about your escrow company if they're in California and they want to do transactions with you guys?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Anybody that has any questions or just wants to conversate and, you know, mastermind a little bit, you can always find me on Facebook. It's Justen Brown. It's pretty simple. I'm here in San Diego. And then our escrow company is Alliance Escrow Inc. And the website is allianceescrowinc.com. And you can usually find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, the website, through you.
Yeah, he's easy to find. He's not that hard to find.
To get a hold of. So I mean, if there's anybody ever that needs a debt paid, they're like, just find Justen.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you had to pay off. Yeah, the payoff king. You know, that's funny. Oh man. Well, listen.
So, yeah, reach out anytime. I mean, anytime I can be a blessing and help somebody and with their success journey, just like this podcast. Like, I mean, I love it. I'd love to help.
Dude, this was a really fun show. One of my favorite shows I've done. And I mean, I'm not just saying that because we're recording right now. This was a really good show, man. People are going to get a lot of value from this. I got a really good feeling about it. So we'll make sure we have all those links and information in the show notes. Justen, man, awesome chopping it up with you today. And I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. See you soon.